In the heart of Webville, a sprawling metropolis where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and the hum of innovation never ceased, an extraordinary event was about to unfold. It was the annual Festival of Legends, a celebration where the city's residents brought their wildest dreams to life through elaborate floats and costumes. Among the usual dragons, unicorns, and superheroes, one creation stood out: a monstrous parade float shaped like a serpent, its body a vibrant tapestry of red and blue webbing, reminiscent of Spider-Man, with the snarling head of a white cat perched atop. This was no ordinary float. It was the Serpent of Webville, a marvel crafted by a reclusive inventor named Elias Thorn. Elias was a man of mystery, his face rarely seen beyond the towering walls of his workshop in the city's industrial district. Rumors swirled that he had once been a brilliant scientist, dismissed from prestigious labs for his unorthodox experiments. Now he poured his genius into art, and the Serpent was his masterpiece. Constructed from lightweight alloys, empowered by a miniature fusion reactor, the float moved with an eerie grace, its mechanical jaws snapping in time with the festival's drumbeats. But what the crowd didn't know, and what Elias himself barely understood, was that the Serpent held a secret, a fragment of ancient magic woven into its core. The story began decades ago, when Elias stumbled upon a relic during an archaeological dig in the deserts beyond Webville. It was a small, crystalline shard, pulsing with a faint golden light, inscribed with symbols no linguist could decipher. Elias, ever the tinkerer, integrated it into his latest project, believing it would enhance the float's aesthetics. Instead, it awakened something dormant, a spirit tied to the shard, a guardian of a long-lost civilization that had revered both cats and serpents as divine. This spirit, calling itself Sssythra, now stirred within the Serpent, its feline eyes glowing with an otherworldly intelligence. As the parade commenced on that crisp morning of May 31st, 2025, the streets buzzed with excitement. Children waved flags, vendors hawked glowing trinkets, and the air carried the scent of street food. The Serpent glided forward, its webbed body undulating as if alive, drawing gasps and cheers. But beneath the surface, Sssythra's presence grew stronger. Elias, monitoring the float from a hidden control booth, noticed the readings on his console spiking. The fusion reactor hummed erratically, and the cat's head turned independently, its gaze locking onto the crowd. Panic set in as the Serpent veered off course, its mechanical tail knocking over a row of stalls. Elias frantically adjusted the controls, but Sssythra had taken hold. The spirit's voice echoed in his mind, a sibilant whisper demanding freedom. "Release me, human," it hissed. "I am the guardian of the old ways, bound by your greed. Set me free, and I shall spare this city." Elias, torn between his creation and the safety of Webville, hesitated. He had always been a loner, but the thought of endangering thousands gnawed at him. Meanwhile, a young woman named Kiera watched from the sidelines. A journalist with a knack for uncovering secrets, she had been tracking Elias for months, suspecting his inventions hid more than mechanical ingenuity. Armed with a camera and a sharp mind, she noticed the Serpent's unnatural movements and began filming. As the crowd scattered, she darted closer, dodging debris, determined to get to the bottom of this chaos. The Serpent reared up, its jaws unhinging, to reveal rows of gleaming teeth, another of Elias's embellishments, now animated by Sssythra's power. It let out a roar that shook the buildings, sending pigeons scattering into the sky. Kiera ducked behind a lamppost, her heart pounding, but her curiosity outweighed her fear. She spotted Elias's booth and made a break for it, climbing the scaffolding with the agility of a cat, ironic given the situation. Inside, Elias was locked in a mental battle with Sssythra. The spirit showed him visions, a golden city razed by invaders, its people slaughtered, and the shard buried as a last act of defiance. "You woke me," Sssythra accused. "Now fulfill my purpose, protect the innocent." Elias realized the spirit wasn't malevolent, it was desperate. But releasing it might destroy the float and his life's work. Kiera burst in, breathless. "What's happening?" she demanded. Elias, startled, explained the shard and Sssythra's awakening. Kiera, ever pragmatic, suggested a compromise: use the float's systems to channel the spirit's energy safely. Together, they worked feverishly, rerouting power to create a containment field. But time was short. The Serpent was now scaling a skyscraper, its webbed body adhering to the glass, like Spider-Man himself. As the military mobilized below, helicopters circling overhead, Elias and Kiera completed their hack. The containment field activated, bathing the Serpent in a soft blue light. Sssythra's roar turned to a mournful wail as it was drawn into the shard, now floating above the float's head. The mechanical beast froze mid-climb, then gently descended, landing with a thud that silenced the crowd. The aftermath was a whirlwind. The festival ended abruptly, but the story of the Serpent of Webville spread like wildfire. Elias and Kiera became unlikely allies, their names linked in the city's lore. The shard was studied by experts, who confirmed its ancient origins, though Sssythra's presence faded, leaving only a whisper on the wind. Elias retired from inventing, content to let his legend stand. Kiera wrote a best-selling book, The Day the Serpent Awoke, blending fact with the magic she'd witnessed. Years later, on a quiet evening, Elias sat on his porch watching the city lights. A white cat rubbed against his leg, its eyes glinting gold for a moment. He smiled, wondering if Sssythra had found peace, or if the spirit still watched over Webville, waiting for the next chapter. The streets of Webville were eerily silent in the hours following the Serpent's descent. Broken festival banners fluttered in the breeze, and the once vibrant crowd had dispersed, leaving behind a scattering of trampled souvenirs and the faint smell of burnt popcorn. Elias Thorn stood at the base of the skyscraper, where his creation had nearly met its end, staring at the Serpent's lifeless form. The float's red and blue webbing gleamed under the emergency lights, but the cat's head, once snarling with Sssythra's fury, now hung limp, its mechanical eyes dark. Beside him, Kiera adjusted her camera, her journalist's instinct still buzzing despite the exhaustion etched into her face. "We did it," she said, her voice a mix of relief and disbelief. But what was that thing? Elias didn't answer immediately. His mind was still reeling from Sssythra's visions, the golden city, the screams, the shard's burial. He glanced at the crystalline fragment, now safely encased in a containment unit he'd rigged from spare parts. It no longer pulsed with light, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the spirit was still watching. "It was a mistake," he finally said, his voice low. "I thought I could control it. I was wrong." Kiera raised an eyebrow. "A mistake that nearly brought down half the city? You owe me a better explanation than that, Thorn." Before Elias could respond, the sound of boots on asphalt interrupted them. A squad of soldiers approached, led by a stern-faced woman in a crisp uniform. General Mara Voss had been overseeing Webville's security during the festival, and her expression made it clear she was not amused. "Elias Thorn," she barked, "you're coming with us. That thing of yours is a national security risk, and you..." She turned to Kiera, her gaze narrowing. "I saw you climbing that booth. You're either very brave or very stupid. Either way, I need your footage." Kiera clutched her camera protectively. "I'm a journalist. This is my story. You can't just..." "I can, and I will," Voss interrupted. "This isn't a game. We need to understand what we're dealing with before it happens again." Reluctantly, Kiera handed over a memory card, though not before slipping the real one into her pocket. She wasn't about to let the military bury this story. Elias, meanwhile, was escorted to a black SUV, his hands cuffed despite his protests. As the vehicle pulled away, Kiera made a silent promise. She would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Kiera returned to her cramped apartment in Webville's Arts District, a cluttered space filled with stacks of newspapers, a humming laptop, and a wall covered in sticky notes. Her cat, a sleek black tom named Shadow, greeted her with a purr, weaving between her legs as she set up her camera. She played the footage of the Serpent, frame by frame, analyzing every detail. The float's movements were too fluid, too alive for mere mechanics. And those eyes. She shivered, remembering the golden glow of Sssythra's gaze. Kiera burst in, breathless. "What's happening?" she demanded. Elias, startled, explained the shard and Sssythra's awakening. Kiera, ever pragmatic, suggested a compromise. used the float's systems to channel the spirit's energy safely. Together, they worked feverishly, rerouting power to create a containment field. But time was short. The serpent was now scaling a skyscraper, its webbed body adhering to the glass, like Spider-Man himself. As the military mobilized below, helicopters circling overhead, Elias and Kiera completed their hack. The containment field activated, bathing the serpent in a soft blue light. Sssythra's roar turned to a mournful wail as it was drawn into the shard, now floating above the float's head. The mechanical beast froze mid-climb, then gently descended, landing with a thud that silenced the crowd. The aftermath was a whirlwind. The festival ended abruptly, but the story of the Serpent of Webville spread like wildfire. Elias and Kiera became unlikely allies, their names linked in the city's lore. The shard was studied by experts, who confirmed its ancient origins, though Sssythra's presence faded, leaving only a whisper on the wind. Elias retired from inventing, content to let his legend stand. Kiera wrote a best-selling book, The Day the Serpent Awoke, blending fact with the magic she'd witnessed. Years later, on a quiet evening, Elias sat on his porch watching the city lights. A white cat rubbed against his leg, its eyes glinting gold for a moment. He smiled, wondering if Sssythra had found peace, or if the spirit still watched over Webville, waiting for the next chapter. The streets of Webville were eerily silent in the hours following the serpent's descent. Broken festival banners fluttered in the breeze, and the once vibrant crowd had dispersed, leaving behind a scattering of trampled souvenirs and the faint smell of burnt popcorn. Elias Thorn stood at the base of the skyscraper, where his creation had nearly met its end, staring at the serpent's lifeless form. The float's red and blue webbing gleamed under the emergency lights, but the cat's head, once snarling with Sssythra's fury, now hung limp, its mechanical eyes dark. Beside him, Kiera adjusted her camera, her journalist's instinct still buzzing despite the exhaustion etched into her face. "We did it," she said, her voice a mix of relief and disbelief. But what was that thing? Elias didn't answer immediately. His mind was still reeling from Sssythra's visions, the golden city, the screams, the shard's burial. He glanced at the crystalline fragment, now safely encased in a containment unit he'd rigged from spare parts. It no longer pulsed with light, but he couldn't shake the feeling that the spirit was still watching. "It was a mistake," he finally said, his voice low. "I thought I could control it. I was wrong." Kiera raised an eyebrow. "A mistake that nearly brought down half the city? You owe me a better explanation than that, Thorn." Before Elias could respond, the sound of boots on asphalt interrupted them. A squad of soldiers approached, led by a stern-faced woman in a crisp uniform. General Mara Voss had been overseeing Webville's security during the festival, and her expression made it clear she was not amused. "Elias Thorn," she barked, "you're coming with us. That thing of yours is a national security risk, and you..." She turned to Kiera, her gaze narrowing. "I saw you climbing that booth. You're either very brave or very stupid. Either way, I need your footage." Kiera clutched her camera protectively. "I'm a journalist. This is my story. You can't just..." "I can, and I will," Voss interrupted. "This isn't a game. We need to understand what we're dealing with before it happens again." Reluctantly, Kiera handed over a memory card, though not before slipping the real one into her pocket. She wasn't about to let the military bury this story. Elias, meanwhile, was escorted to a black SUV, his hands cuffed despite his protests. As the vehicle pulled away, Kiera made a silent promise. She would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. Kiera returned to her cramped apartment in Webville's Arts District, a cluttered space filled with stacks of newspapers, a humming laptop, and a wall covered in sticky notes. Her cat, a sleek black tom named Shadow, greeted her with a purr, weaving between her legs as she set up her camera. She played the footage of the serpent, frame by frame, analyzing every detail. The float's movements were too fluid, too alive for mere mechanics. And those eyes. She shivered, remembering the golden glow of Sssythra's gaze. Armed with this lead, Kiera infiltrated a Nexus gala posing as a caterer. She spotted Arachne across the room, his spider tattoo stark against his pale skin. Slipping into a back office, she hacked into a terminal and found encrypted files labeled Project Sssythra. Before she could download them, Arachne cornered her, a knife gleaming in his hand. "You're meddling in things you don't understand," he hissed. "Walk away, or you'll end up like Thorn." Kiera's self-defense training kicked in. She disarmed him with a swift kick, grabbing the knife and bolting for the exit. She had what she needed, proof that Nexus had orchestrated the Serpent's rampage, hoping to steal Elias's tech and the shard. With Arachne's confession recorded on her hidden mic, Kiera went public with her story. Her article, "The Serpent's Shadow, A Conspiracy in Webville," exposed Nexus innovations and cleared Elias's name. The city reeled from the scandal, and Nexus's CEO was arrested. Elias, freed from custody, met Kiera at the site where the Serpent had been dismantled. "You saved me," he said, his voice gruff. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet," Kiera replied, handing him a small box. Inside was the shard, which she'd recovered from the military base with Jax's help. "This belongs with you, but promise me, no more parade floats." Elias chuckled, the first real laugh he'd had in years. "Deal." The Festival of Legends resumed the following year, but the Serpent was absent. Instead, a new tradition emerged, the Sssythra Memorial, a statue of a cat and serpent entwined, symbolizing unity and protection. Children left flowers at its base, and Webville's residents whispered tales of the day the city was saved by a journalist, an inventor, and a spirit from the past. Elias retired to a quiet life, mentoring young inventors and keeping the shard locked away. Kiera's book became a bestseller, cementing her as Webville's most fearless reporter. And on quiet nights, when the city slept, a white cat with golden eyes roamed the streets, a silent guardian watching over all.